All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah. We're going to do some introductions in a little bit. But we're all from Gibson Ek High School, and I'm a senior. I use she, her pronouns, and this is a part of our internship with Influence the Choice. This is one of the projects that we're doing. All right, so let's pass it over to Emma now.
Hello, everyone. My name's Emma. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a sophomore at Gibson Ek High School.
Hello, my name is Winona. I use she, her pronouns, and I am also a sophomore at Gibson Ek High School.
Great. So on the next slide, we've put some of our discussion topics for today. We're going to talk about boundaries, relationships, dealing with stressful situations, core values, and friendships. Next slide, please. So to start us out, I wanted to start out by talking about what kind of boundaries we can set. And so physical boundaries relate to how you feel about being touched and standing too close. One of the ways that I draw this boundary is to just say, no, thank you, or I don't want to be touched when someone tries to, touch or hug me, maybe high five me. And it's okay to not want physical contact at one point and then change your mind. Another boundary is psychological boundaries, which relate to being a target of verbal abuse or bullying. One of the ways to set these boundaries is to say, I don't like being talked to this way, or I feel like this when you say this. It can be hard when someone tries to combat these phrases, but remember that your emotions and your feelings are your own and not theirs. Emotional boundaries relate to asking and answering personal questions. Again, a simple way to draw boundaries for this is to simply say, I would prefer not to answer that, or just not answer at all. For asking a personal question, always make sure that the person is okay with being asked. It's normal to have different boundaries for different people. Consent is what is important in all of these situations. Make sure to ask people their boundaries, and it can help them feel safe or calm around you. You may figure out boundaries through something that happened, but make sure to stick to your boundaries once you set them. On the next slide, we're going to talk about why boundaries are important. Boundaries set the precedent of how you wanted to be treated. Setting boundaries can ensure that relationships can be mutually respectful, appropriate, and caring. Because we choose who we interact with in our personal lives, such as our friends, but we can't always choose in situations such as our family. It's important to draw boundaries with everybody. It's important to prioritize your safety by drawing boundaries. Like, for example, not getting in a car with someone who's under the influence of drugs or alcohol. They might pressure you, but by drawing these boundaries, you can ensure that you keep yourself safe. On the next slide, we're not going to leave you with just, here's some boundaries. We're going to talk about how you can draw boundaries. Identify your physical and emotional and mental limits. Consider what you can and can't tolerate and what makes you uncomfortable or stressed. Be direct about your boundaries. Tell people what you need. Sometimes when a person is more likely like you don't have to be direct, but in most cases, it's the healthy thing to do. In romantic relationships, for example, be direct about the amount of time you're going to be spending together. Give yourself permission. Guilt and self-doubt can get in the way, but allow yourself to say no. Practice self-awareness and being assertive. Acknowledge when you find yourself not holding to your boundaries and why you aren't holding to them. Seek support. There's no shame in talking to somebody and about how you feel and how to draw boundaries. And let yourself be exhausted and tired. It's okay. On the next slide, remember that drawing boundaries may mean unfollowing people in real life, just like on social media. It's not always comfortable, but it is always important. You have to keep yourself safe. It's difficult and can be lonely, but only for a little while. In the end, it is healthier for a relationship to take a step back. On the next slide, we pass it off to Winona.
Thank you, Emma. I'm going to be going over relationships. You may have heard of a relationship as when two people date, but relationships are not just romantic. Your friendships are relationships, and the connection you have with your family, mentors, peers, and enemies are all relationships. A relationship is simply the way two or more people are connected and is absolutely not exclusive to romance. Next slide, please. Healthy relationships are essential to our functioning as humans. Humans are a natural pack animal. I'm sure you've heard that. And we not only thrive in groups of people we trust, we need those healthy relationships to properly function. Relationships can turn unhealthy, and I would like to share with you all the signs of an unhealthy relationship on this next slide. An unhealthy relationship shows an unbalance of trust, power, and support. If you find yourself in an unhealthy relationship, you might experience some of the following. It's important you notice these signs, and I'll emphasize why later. Some of the signs of an unhealthy relationship might be that they hurt you, whether that be with their words, hands, manipulation, or something else. They might threaten or guilt you into doing something, especially something you might not want to do or are comfortable doing. They might try to prevent you from or guilt you for having other friends besides them. They might even try to directly tell you that you're not allowed to hang out with your other friends. They might call you names or make you feel bad, and you might feel like you're walking on eggshells around them, or a minefield where if you say one wrong thing or make one wrong move, they'll explode. They might pressure you into doing things you aren't comfortable with or aren't sure you're ready for. And last but absolutely not least, they don't respect your boundaries. Boundaries are essential in any healthy relationship. And if someone isn't respecting your boundaries that are put in place to keep you healthy and safe, then that is a large indicator you might be in an unhealthy relationship. Next slide, please. So if you ever find yourself in an unhealthy relationship, it's natural to feel lost, to worry about the many aspects of leaving the situation. When someone guilts you and makes you feel so small, it's hurtful, but it's commonly because we put their happiness and their health as our highest priority, when that highest priority should be our own health and our own happiness. When you've known this person your whole life, or maybe you just met them yesterday, you are not responsible for someone else's happiness. Understanding your self-worth and reassessing your priorities and values is crucial to leaving and getting over an unhealthy relationship. The more you realize your self-worth, the more you'll realize how much harm an unhealthy relationship can do. And that is scary. Confronting our problems and making the decision to face them is scary, and it isn't an easy task. When you're in a confident place, set a time to talk with them and try to set boundaries if you feel safe doing so. An example of a boundary you can set is if they insult you for the clothes you wear and that hurts you, communicate that to them and say you would no longer like them to comment on your clothing. If they respect that and continue to in the future, that's great. But if they don't or say they'll respect your boundaries, then continue to comment on your clothing and insult you, then it's time to leave the relationship. Leaving a relationship is scary and difficult, especially if you have a bond with this person. If you're at a point where you're comfortable with a direct approach, you can simply tell them you no longer want to be around them because of the hurt they put upon you. And this is the approach I recommend the most because communication, but I know it's not always a possible one or a safe one, and it's never an easy one. If you feel they might hurt you or themselves when you leave the relationship, tell an adult, like a teacher, counselor, parent, coach, or any trusted adult you can think of. Next slide, please. Thank you all for listening to that. I know it was a bit doom and gloom, but I want you all to remember to stand up for yourselves when needed. Moving on to a different and generally happier side of things, I want to talk about the aspects of a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship is one where you feel supported, you would trust one another, they don't make you feel judged, you feel safe and happy around them, they respect and validate your boundaries, and they value your opinion. In a healthy relationship, there's a lot of communication and honesty, which tends to be skills to practice and build up, which brings us to our next slide. How does one build up a healthy relationship? How does one create that bond where you both feel safe? First off, all the people in said relationship need to be respectful and do their own part in creating a safe space. A very large part of a healthy relationship is communication. It builds trust and helps us understand one another. Depending on how close you are with the person, definitely would determine how much you share with them. So I'm not saying you're required to share every single thing you've ever experienced to every person you know. Communication can work in instances like two project partners are trying to work together. It would help if they communicated to each other, hey, this is how I typically work best, so I'd really appreciate it if we could incorporate this into my part of the project. That is a great example of how communication benefits both parties, because one person gets to work in the way they prefer and the other person gets quality products because the other person was allowed to work in the way that they prefer. Trusting one another is also a big part of building and maintaining a healthy relationship. For some, trust does not come very easy, and that's okay. It might take a while to build, but do be making that effort in your closer relationships, and then hopefully to more people in the world. In a healthy relationship, it's also essential to set and respect boundaries. Emma shared a lot about boundaries with you all, so I don't want to get too repetitive there. Boundaries will help both of you feel safe and secure. Empathy is also a very important aspect of a healthy relationship. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And it's important that you take into account the emotions of yourself and the others around you, how they might be feeling. There are many other aspects of building a healthy relationship, but I would say I've covered the essential ones. And here's where I passed off to Hannah.
Thanks, Winona. So dealing with stressful situations is something I want to talk about. And I'm going to, in detail, kind of explain the 4 A's. Now, you can expand your stress management toolkit by mastering these 4 strategies for coping with stress. When we feel the effects of stress weighing us down, it's like lugging a backpack that's becoming heavier and heavier by the minute. Too much stress can make our journey through life very difficult. Happy events such as a wedding, as well as unhappy events such as overwork, can cause stress. Now, when your stress levels exceed your ability to cope, you need to restore the balance by reducing the stressors or increasing your ability to cope with them, or possibly a combination of both. So next slide, I am going to talk about the 4 A's, kind of what I like to call it, which under the change of situation, we have avoiding the stressor and altering the stressor. And under changing your reaction to the stress, we have adapting to the stressor and accepting the stressor. So first, let me talk about avoiding the stressor a bit. In a lot of situations, you can simply avoid a lot of stress by planning ahead and reaping the benefits of a lighter load, right? So taking control of your surroundings, avoiding people that you know are going to bother you and make you upset, and learning to say no. Altering the stressor is also something that is very beneficial during a time of stress, which is kind of taking inventory of what needs to be changed. So kind of, sitting back and seeing, okay, what can I do differently to make the situation better? And attempting to try to change it as well. And sometimes you might fail, sometimes you might succeed, but it's good to try new things. And you're changing all the time as well. So sometimes things might work for you at some parts of your life, and other times they might not. Respectively asking others to change their behavior as well is very important. Communicating your feelings openly and stating limits and boundaries in advance so people know how to talk with you, how to talk with other people, and so that the situation can be less stressful for you and others. Now, that's kind of changing the overall situation, but sometimes we need to change our perception or our reaction to certain stressors. So the first one is adapting to the stressor. That's kind of like changing your standards or expectations positively to help that situation, which could include, stopping negative self-talk, improving yourself, reframing the issue, looking at the situation on a greater scale from the bigger picture. So kind of just taking a step back and adjusting your perception or your standards of the situation. Now, the last one is accepting the stressor. And this works sometimes, and other times it doesn't. But sometimes, we really do just need to move on and let go of things, which is really, really hard for me. A lot of people I know, it's very hard to let go, kind of lose that control. But sometimes we have no other choice than to accept the way that things are and move on. So that could also look like forgiving someone, forgiving yourself, and just simply learning from your mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. So sometimes that's just kind of the best way to deal with the situation, is like reflection afterwards. So stressors, good and bad, are a part of everyone's life. But practicing these techniques to balance stress will make it a lot better when you in later on in life kind of go through these situations, as well as just knowing that you have that toolkit to kind of know how to deal with different situations. It can feel good to know that you have certain things to cope with and certain things to go to when you're in that type of situation. Okay, next slide. So I want to ask Winona and Emma this, because again, I think something that's really interesting about just everyone being so different from one another is also just how we deal with certain situations. So, for example, you find out your friend is spreading a false rumor about you to others. I want to ask Emma and Winona, out of the 4 A's I just talked about, which one would you choose, or even a combination of them, or all of them, or none of them? How would you, just in the moment right now, choose to deal with the situation?
For me, like right now, I'd probably pick D. I'd probably just accept that this is happening and go talk to my friend about it. But accepting the stressor seems like the right option for me at this moment. So
Awesome. Thank you, Emma.
I think I'd choose a combination of avoiding it and accepting it. I think I'd avoid it first and start just finding anything else to do, because I think I have more important things to do than worry about a rumor. But then if it got bad, then I just try to accept the situation and move on.
Cool. So right, even just that example is, Winona and Emma kind of had two similar but also kind of separate ways of how they would deal with that. And it also depends, right, where you are in your life, what you have going on. It can totally change from day to day. But just know that, everyone reacts to stress in different ways. And just, learning kind of how you deal with things the best way, that's going to be really helpful. Okay, next slide. Now, peer pressure influences about 90% of high school students, which is kind of crazy, and it's sad that that's a statistic, but that's just kind of the reality of it. And so I want to go into a bit more depth about how to deal with peer pressure, because I think peer pressure will always be a thing, but I think when you don't know how to deal with it, that can make you end up in terrible situations. So on the next slide, I want to talk about core values. Knowing your core values and being confident about them, being confident within yourself, and really knowing what you believe in, what you're looking for in others, is really, really important. So, for example, core values could be dependability, reliability, commitment, loyalty, open-mindedness, honesty, all of the above. They're just those values that you really think are very important in your life, or that you like to have, right, in a friend or in a relationship. For example, honesty is really important to me, and I feel like it's a red flag when someone isn't honest with me. So I really look out for honest people in my life, and people that can just be open with me and not afraid to, tell me the truth. I really appreciate that. But, to someone else, that might not be the number one thing for them. So I want to ask Emma and Winona again, kind of what their top core values are, and maybe how, why that is your top core value, or how you think you got it.
I'd say one of my top core values is a sense of mutual respect. Having a relationship with someone who respects me as much as I respect them. That's been important to me ever since I was in middle school when I realized that you could have mutual respect. So
Awesome. And Katie, I think you can go to the next slide as well. Yeah, okay. Winona, what do you think?
I'd say my core values are safety. I highly prioritize that. Safety in general is a huge thing for me. Honesty, and cognitive empathy, the ability to use logic to understand what others might be feeling and using that to be kind and respectful to them.
Awesome. So, right, even just, those two different people, and they have totally different core values. And if you don't know what your core values are, or, you haven't really sat down with yourself and really thought about it, I think it's definitely important, because it can just make making friends easier, making sure you don't, end up with someone you don't want to be with. And just know that your core values can definitely change throughout your life. And that's totally okay, but they should be coming from your own self. Someone else shouldn't be changing, your core value negatively. Okay, next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, peer pressure myths versus reality. Because I feel like there are so many stereotypes about peer pressure, so I kind of want to just go over a couple of those. Next slide. So a big myth is that giving into peer pressure means a person will feel better about themselves and fit in. But the reality is that succumbing to peer pressure often leaves people with the feeling that they betrayed their own beliefs and desires in order to conform to what others want. And on the outside, a lot of times this is very true. Like when we see people doing what everyone else is doing that maybe you might not think to do, and these people seem like they have a lot of friends and they're having a lot of fun, it can be really hard to succumb to peer pressure. But the reality of it is a lot of these people do wind up feeling like they betrayed their own beliefs and desires, and they're trying to fit in and be like everyone else, which in the end is really not a good thing. So that's just a little bit of perspective. Okay, next slide. Okay, those who don't give in to peer pressure wind up feeling lonely and outcast. So kind of like the opposite, right? So if you give in to peer pressure, you're going to have so many friends, you're going to feel really good. And then another myth is those who don't give in to peer pressure feel the opposite. They're going to feel lonely, outcast, not going to have any friends, they're not going to fit in. But that's really, really not true. And the reality of it is many, many people successfully resist peer pressure. And this strengthens their sense of self and their ability to thrive in a variety of social settings, because peer pressure, even though it happens in, middle school, elementary school, even high school, it will honestly happen your whole life with many different people, many different groups of people, a variety of social settings. So really knowing how to resist this peer pressure, and know what to stand for is really important throughout your whole life, because this will be a skill you'll need to have throughout your whole entire life. So successfully resisting this peer pressure means that a lot of these people may keep their friends intact, or they also might find a new group of like-minded friends. If your friends are doing something that you really don't like and they're pressuring you to do it and you don't want to, kind of like what Winona was saying before, it is fine to not be friends with them anymore, or to kind of distance yourself a little bit, especially if they are pressuring you and making you feel bad for not doing what they're doing. I think, depending on the situation, it might be time to kind of reconsider if you want to continue hanging out with this person or people. Okay, next slide. So the second thing, of not giving into peer pressure and kind of avoiding that, is having a good quality group of friends, because when you have a good quality group of friends, they will stand up for you. You will feel safe. You will feel supported. And a lot of times you won't need to give in to what other people are doing if you have people that are supporting you and making good decisions. So whether it be, you have one really good friend, two really good friends, doesn't really matter, but just knowing that you have at least one person you can go to that can make you feel safe and secure, is really a great way to resist that peer pressure and end up in better situations. Next slide. Did you know you are influenced by the 5 most frequent people you hang out with? And this could be family or friends, or really, whoever those 5 most frequent people are that you see a lot, is really who you are influenced by a lot of the time. So if you think about that, like, okay, who are the 5 most frequent people I hang out with, then kind of see, okay, are these people a good influence on me? Am I acting like these people? Are they providing me with the support, love, and kindness that I need? And hopefully your answer is yes to that. But if it's not, then you might want to think about, surrounding yourself with people that are going to make you a better person. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Next slide. Again, having solid friendships in our lives also promotes healthy brain health. And like I talked about stress before, a great coping mechanism for stress is hang out with friends and having fun. And, them encouraging you to make better lifestyle choices as well. That affects us physically, that affects us mentally, emotionally, socially. So really having solid friendships is only a positive. And so really make that a high priority. Just now and throughout your whole life, because friends are really, really great and they can really help with stress. Okay, next slide. Another big one is listening to your gut. Listening to your gut is basically an instinct or intuition, an immediate or basic feeling or reaction without necessarily a logical rationale. And I think as just human beings, we've kind of been trained to give outside powers a say in our lives. And intuition reminds us that we hold the power. It can steer us to what's right for us. And when our gut has reservations about something, it may express them physically as well. Your body cues might be giving you an answer that your brain doesn't want to hear. For example, my leg muscles get really, really tense when it seems like my intuition is starting to weigh in on a person or a situation. And so also keep that in mind, that maybe your brain isn't intuitively telling you to do something, but your body might be saying something else. Listening to your gut as well and your intuition helps to avoid unhealthy relationships and situations. And like I said before, throughout your life, many, many people will have ideas on what's best for you, on what you should do, on what you should not do. Some of these are held with good intentions. Some of them are not held with good intentions. But it can be kind of hard to tell if, which intention it is, and what category it falls into. But if you kind of put aside all of those external opinions and instead just listen to the advice of your own intuition, usually it will guide you to what is truly best for you. Next slide. Learn to feel comfortable saying no. And this is a huge one, especially with peer pressure. And I'm sure you've heard it before, but in the moment, it really is hard to say no, and to feel, like you're being rude to someone, or you're not, you're not having fun, or, you might feel embarrassed. But it's really, really important to learn to feel comfortable saying no, that if you're uncomfortable with anything, you should feel empowered to, make that request, anytime, anywhere, whenever. And, this also is helpful if you have those core values, if you give yourself time. Sometimes removing yourself from that situation or the moment can also be helpful, but you really don't have to provide any excuse, and you shouldn't feel ashamed or embarrassed to say no. So definitely that's a huge one. Okay, next slide. So this is a quote that I really like, which is, care about what other people think and you will always be their prisoner. Kind of going on to everything I just said, really listen to your intuition and your gut, and don't let other people decide the decisions for you, because you are your own person, and usually you make the best decisions for yourself. And so, yeah, I'll just kind of leave that quote out there to kind of think about. But that's the end of our presentation. So thank you for listening. We hope you guys got something from this and that you learned something. And if you learned something new, feel free to share it with a friend or a parent as well, and kind of, spread the word about all of this. Emma, do you want to talk about our resources, or Winona, whoever?
Yeah, sure. So we've provided some resources for you all. I believe your teacher will have access to them. We put the crisis line down, as well as Influence the Choice, which is the organization that we're interning with. Gibson Ek, come check us out. Applications, I believe, come out around February or March every year. And Teen Link, which I don't know much about, but I believe they've come in and talked to us a few times, and it's pretty cool. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having us. We really appreciate presenting and being here. Feel free again if you have any questions to reach out to us. Yeah, thank you guys.